And so another way in which we humans can interact with landslides and mass wasting events is through timber harvesting. So the picture on the left, and the resulting, I guess, for the picture on the right is probably in Brazil. Brazil has pretty not very flexible laws, I should say, in terms of how much they harvest timber. So they have this very large clear-cut areas in which they don't really regulate the amount of trees. They don't just take like a few within say an acre or something, but they take the whole acre away. So they don't have it very well regulated in that respect. So that's why I think it's Brazil. But anyways, through timber harvesting, we do this clear cutting at times. We also do road building, which, as we have seen, decreases slope stability. We increase erosion and create, hence, soil slips on geologically unstable land by, removing the trees, and hence the water that runs through is now going to take some of that earth and erode it. And we also interrupt the surface drainage by altering the subsurface movement of the water. And we also change the distribution of those earth materials by the water movement. Some of the effects from landslides that we experience as humans or as just society. So in the US, about 25 fatalities a year occur due to landslides. Worldwide is a lot higher. As we saw from flooding last week, there was a lot of them in Asia and also in parts of the Americas. The same goes for landslides, especially again in Asia and in South America. We see landslides affect tons of people. Damages in terms of cost is also very great. So in the US, about 1 billion or greater than 1 billion a year, and that includes roads, homes, the utilities that serve these homes. There's no longer travel in those roads, for example, and it also increases the possibility for flooding. Another thing that landslides can do is they, by the landslide movement, certain fungi that are not exposed to the surface can be exposed to the surface, and as they are, they spread this spores that may create disease. So that's kind of a funny effect, but it is one of the effects from landslides. Some of the things that we as humans can do to decrease this excuse me. Excuse me. Oh boy. Can do to decrease this incident. That, guys. So, some of the things that we as humans can do to decrease that incident of landslides can be to build stabilized structures, meaning take into account the potential for landslides and build them accordingly. Also to grade the land surfaces upon which we are building our structures well with the correct materials. In the first place, we shouldn't even try to build where we have areas that are prone to landslides if we can. And then another thing that we can do is improve the drainage upon which roads or homes are built on top of. So improve the drainage for the water to flow underneath well, so that you don't have the massive accumulations of moisture in the surrounding soils that then later will weaken the slopes. So before we go in depth about how we can prevent some of the effects from landslides even further, I'd like to talk about the natural service functions of landslides, or a few of them. So some of them is that they can produce deposits that become mineral resources. Some of those mineral resources can be things like gold or diamonds, but any other metals, for example, are very common in these type of deposits. So because they are switching the place from where the soil was to a different one, it could create, further spots for the resources to grow in, basically. So many times these veins, and as you're seeing down here, this placer, as it's called, is many a times where the ore minerals try to or want to develop at. First of all, because of the elements within those sediments, but also because of the stability of the site itself. and again, at least the placer itself formed because of the mass wasting event. So that is one of the natural service functions. Another one is the creation of new habitats in forests and aquatic ecosystems. So that's by the redistribution of the soils, basically. And that will increase the plant and animal diversity in that specific site. Thing that can be done to prevent landslides in a specific place is going to be grading. So grading, at least in this top picture, which is in a mine, can be done by basically adding steps. So instead of just digging down completely or nearly vertical or at a very high steep slope, they do this kind of steps in between, so that if you do have landslides, as you kind of see right here, the toe of those slides will actually stay within that graded flat spot. So you see on the left here, this is actually a rice paddy, but it's the same idea that they do it for. First of all, for landslide prevention, and second of all, for growth of their produce, which is pretty cool. And then another thing that can be done, if it's done safely, is do that material from the upper slope can be due to the base. So that is, if it's done right and engineered well, it can be good. But it's one of those examples that I gave earlier for what should not be done when you are constructing and urbanizing. Let's see if I can find it real fast. So it's basically doing this, taking some material from up here and placing it down here. So that can be dangerous, but if you do it well, it can be good and beneficial. Okay. Thing that can be done is get the slope supports. So whenever you build your home or a structure on a place that is prone to landslides, you don't want it just simply hanging out there in the kind of steeper slopes. So what you do is you put the slope supports that dig deeper into the a depth, I guess I should say, below the weakness surface, that zone of weakness that the landslide could happen at. So that is another way to prevent your structure from being damaged from the landslide. Another thing that you can do is have these concrete walls or gabions, as we had seen. Gabions were those kind of cages full of rocks that were used for lessening the erosion in flooding. Gabions can also be useful for preventing slides. So if you place them in a weakened slope, as you're seeing here on the highway, they can create kind of a more resistant place. Another thing that you can do is have drainage control. So either by inhibiting that water infiltration, so not letting the water infiltrate and hence saturate the soils, like you have over here in the surface drainage. But also you could use things like water diversion. So using this culverts, for example, you allow the water to flow more easily through it and then spill it in perhaps what this looks like bedrock, rather than let the water, saturate this kind of clay-rich area and remain in the soil and saturated enough so that it slips even further into a landslide. One of the things that humans can do for warning whether or not there's going to be a landslide is the purpose of it is obviously to provide time for evacuation, because there's not much that we can do to completely prevent it when it's bound to happen. So we can monitor some of the changes in the systems. So some of those can be based on tilt meters, which basically check the slope angle, geophones, slide fences, and acoustic flow monitors, which, to be completely honest, I don't know the specifics of them, but those are all used. And then the shallow wells and the rain gauges basically tell you how much moisture a specific region is getting. So say that region has had a landslide before and the specific soil is the same as it was before, and it took, let's say that 100 inches of rain for the landslide to occur. Then if you have a rain gauge and you know the timing of the rain event, then it's easier for us to know when the soil will give in. and potentially have a mass wasting event. Ways in which we can identify these potential landslides are by recognizing features. So a crescent-shaped crack or terrace can easily tell us that that is one of the edges from the width of the landslide, as you're seeing here on the top image. An area of bare soil or rock on the hillside can also tell us that that's the headscarp, right? A boulder or talus at the base of a cliff, it tells us that that could be the sediments that slid by that slide. A linear path of cleared vegetation also tells us that there was potentially sediment that kind of poured through there and eroded all the vegetation on the sides. Exposed bedrock with layering parallel on the slope, that also tells us that that could be the headscarp, for example. Masses of sediment at the base of the slope, a similar idea to the boulder or the taluses, except for a different type of mass wasting event, right? And then irregular surface at the base of the slope, same idea in that respect. Finally, recognizing the slope stability and making a map of it, or a landslide hazard map. So basically, higher ed geologists, we are trained to look for these type of features on the land, and we could tell you what areas are prone for landslides and up to what degree you should or you should not build there, or you should do so with care, adding certain precautions, perhaps like the what are they called? Slope supports, or by adding a better drainage system to the specific place where you're building. So definitely recognizing the slope stability and making a map of it could be the best way to, identify that potential landslide. This is kind of what a landslide hazard map will look like. It will tell you no dwelling zone whatsoever. Then it will tell you in other colors things where you can build with precaution. It's also very important for government agencies to get this kind of maps, and it is very important for them to see where they can place critical facilities such as hospitals, schools, police stations, which should definitely be in the safe locations. So if you have a landslide, say in a home apartment complex, let's call it, why not? It's not such a big deal as if you have a landslide occur where the hospital is compromised, right? Because in the apartment complexes, people who are hurt could go to the hospital. However, if there's no hospital, then everybody who is injured has no place to go, kind of thing. So a landslide hazard map, like the one you're seeing below, is something that most governments invest on highly. Go pretty fast for this last few slides, so you guys need to pause the video probably and read the rest of it. But some of the adjustments to this hazards are personal preparations. So if you're buying a property on a slope, you should probably do all of the things listed below. In fact, it's kind of funny because in the Terra Nativa landslide that occurred, there had been a geological evaluation, but it had been done, I think, in the 60s or 70s. And so those records weren't digitized and were lost. And so obviously, in that specific part of the foothills, which is in fact one of the only ones that is prone to such major landslides, that is where they built, of course, and they weren't prepared for it. Such a big landslide. So there you go. Do those things if you're planning on buying property or constructing property on a slope like that. For things like avalanche awareness, many ski resorts actually purposefully trigger avalanches so that they prevent them happening during their high events, because most of them actually are triggered by victims and or others in their party. They happen usually when there are skiers out there. So things to know, don't ski alone, educate yourself, and ask maybe how often they do this purposefully triggered avalanche. Okay, and last but not least, what are the other natural hazards that landslides are linked to? They can be earthquakes, right? If an earthquakes happen, the land may be actually disturbed and fall. Volcanoes by lahars, storms, fires may cause landslides because they debilitate the soil. And then they can also cause flooding and tsunamis, right? Smaller scale tsunamis. Let you think about it. Okay, guys, see you next week. Bye.